Our next session is with Chris Shannon and Candice Beckman. So this one is around leading business process improvement, 7 lessons for leaders. Something we have been talking about over the last couple of days is leadership, alignment with strategy, sponsors, champions, and I'm sure that Chris and Candice will touch on some of these. It's a brief introduction. That's a new word, isn't it? It's definitely early in the morning. Brief introduction. So Chris is a member of our Asia Pacific Lean in Higher Education Steering Committee. Chris is from the University of Queensland. He's got over 20 years of experience as a manager and leader. He currently manages the UQ Centre for Clinical Research, co-located with the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital. He's quite a prolific author. So he's author of Collaborative Problem Solving, A Guide to Improving Your Workplace. He's been a member of our network for the past decade, and also serves on the Global Steering Committee as the Deputy Chair of Governance. Welcome, Chris. Candice is an experienced facilitator from University of Texas at Arlington. Welcome. Did we check what time it is for you now? Probably in the afternoon, I believe, Candice.
It's 4 o'clock.
Fantastic. Oh, such a good time. Candice is an experienced facilitator and leads a business improvement team at University of Texas, Arlington. She has a background in project management and application adoption, including training, process improvement, change management. Candice has presented at several lean higher education conferences on different aspects of her continuous improvement work at Arlington. And we're delighted to welcome you both for this joint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So Candice will be driving. I'll be in the passenger seat.
Go ahead, Chris. I'll get us queued up on our slides while you're chatting.
Okay. So this presentation is road testing, really, a book that Candice and I are currently writing called Leading Business Process Improvement, 7 Lessons for Leaders. And the purpose of the book has really come about through conversations we've had with each other and with lots of BPI people over time about, so can people see the slides?
Not yet. I don't have them up yet. Give me just a moment.
Sorry, I should slow down.
You're good.
Conversations we've had with lots of people over time about the challenges of setting up and running business process improvement or continuous improvement programs. There's lots of literature out there that says that they fail at anywhere between 50 to 70% or even higher, depending on the industry. Lots of things get started and then they either stop or they don't achieve the results that were anticipated. So yep, this is where we're up to. And the tone of the conversations and kind of the general, I guess the headlines have been, not all leaders understand what we do. Support is variable. There's a picture of a beautiful shot of the desert or mountains or something.
Give me a second.
No, we've got the slides. It's all right. Sorry. And so Rufus said yesterday in his presentation, in response to a question, that lean and continuous improvement is simply not taught in business schools, and his experience is that leaders aren't exposed to it, therefore they don't understand it, at least leaders in higher education. And so they don't, of course they don't get it. You know, why would you instinctively grab onto something you've not experienced? And then Bill Bolzer in Lean Higher Education, 2nd edition, which is a great book. I love both editions of that book. In the 2nd edition had case studies from 16 different universities, which were published in 2020, but I think written in 2018. And then at the San Diego conference in 2023, said that 11 of those 16 who had in 2018 said, here's what we're doing, were reporting that their programs had either closed or they felt were at risk of closing. So support is variable. Okay, I think we need to go back one slide.
This one?
Back one. No, back. This one.
Yeah.
slide number 3 on my set. I think back one more. Oh, actually, no, just leave it there. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. And so I guess the other element that we've come up with is from my own experience from writing collaborative problem solving, which was a book that I thought, well, that I wrote aimed at an audience of people who worked in organizations without any business improvement support. I thought there must be, because there's such a high rate of failure, there must be a lot of people out there who don't know what to do. They don't have any support to go to. And I thought, well, I'll write a book that's very simple to encourage people to get started. And it's actually been used by a lot of business process improvement people who say, you're kind of describing my experience. And then they were telling me things like, I gave it to my boss, I gave it to a stakeholder, I gave it to someone to read. And so in conversations with Candice and with other people, and primarily with Candice over the last year or 2 years, we started to say, well, what would a book that specifically addressed these needs look like? And what would we have in it? And so we brainstormed and we spoke to a lot of other people. We're still doing interviews if people are interested, and came up with, we had 6 lessons and we've now pushed it out to 7. And we're calling them lessons. I like alliteration, so I thought 7 lessons for leaders sounded good. We've tried to condense them down to 3-word titles that you'll see in the coming slides. We actually had some quite long titles for these things initially, and one piece of feedback we got was that it was too much jargon. And so we really had to work for quite a while to come up with our, what in Australian politics we would call 3-word slogans. So we'll run through those. So I think next slide, Candice, and handing over to you.
All right. So yes, as Chris said, we're going to go through each of these lessons that we've come up with and that we're working on. We're doing lots of interviews, talking to people, making sure that we have the right lessons in the book, if you will. So today we'll go through each of those 7 lessons. I'll show those here in just a moment. And then at the end, we have a lucid board set up. We would love to hear from you all, just generically on the lesson. So we've got 3 questions on what do you think about this overall? Have we missed anything? Is there anything else that you think we should consider? And then I've got space for you, and I'll drop that in the chat if you guys want to open that and go in there beforehand. You're welcome to. If not, we'll get to it at the end, but there is a lucid board, so if you want to take notes as we're chatting, you're welcome to. And then there's a section for each of the lessons, and it's got just a brief description of that lesson and space for you to take notes. So as we said, we're trying to talk to people and learn from practitioners because this is for you as well as for leaders. So we want to make sure and talk with as many as we can while we're writing this and gather people's input. And if you would like to have a deeper conversation with us afterwards, please let us know. We are happy to connect and we'll set up some time with you to chat separately.
Absolutely. I feel like this book is really for the lean higher education community and for business process improvement people. So we started with our own ideas about what we thought leaders should know, what stakeholders should know, but we are not precious about these things because we have been listening to lots of people and we really want this to be the voice of the practitioner talking to stakeholders. And we've also interviewed people in leadership roles and in different organizations and different regions to sort of test these across industries and across locations. So there's the 7. We'll talk through each one in the slides that follow, and then yeah, we'll have a moderated session to get feedback on it.
Great. So our first lesson is mind your business, and we don't mean that in more of the negative connotation, but in the sense of keep your business front of mind. So it's maybe a little tongue in cheek here, but in this lesson, we discuss communication and problem solving and listening to problems. So as a leader, it's really critical to learn to listen to problems because they don't always come in pretty packages. Your employees and your customers or your clients are not always going to bring you the root cause of an issue or a well-defined problem statement. And so as a leader, you have to learn to start listening, asking those probing questions, and collecting that information. Some of the other things we highlight are going to highlight in this section are reflection for leaders. Things like, where did you come from? Did you raise up through the organization? That may give you your own perception and perspective versus a leader who comes from maybe switching industries or switching companies. You're going to have a much different perspective than if you had promoted through the organization. So touching on different perspectives and where leaders come from, and just having them reflect on those perceptions and even biases that we have when we're listening to problems. And then talking about the iceberg analogy of, as a leader, you can see the iceberg perhaps, but you might not be able to see everything under the surface. And so questions, probing, and process improvement tools and practitioners can help you see what's under the surface. And so we offer some introductory tools in this chapter, things like a process inventory, jotting down and documenting, having groups, maybe not the leader, but having groups inventory what all of their services are and what their processes are and what is the health of them. That can help give a holistic snapshot of things like where our workload balances, where are the issues coming from. If you're hearing a lot of information as a leader about a particular area, a process inventory might help you find out that next layer and next step that you need to take with that group. And then talking about practitioners. So as Chris mentioned, as we've heard in several sessions, people are asking that question of how do we show our value and connect leaders with the use of process improvement services in our organizations. And so we'll spend a little bit of time about talking about that, how a practitioner can be an extra pair of eyes for you, how they can help bring you information and help you see underneath the service and work with teams and do some of that team building and problem solving and those systematic projects of continuous improvement and help a leader get to where they want to go and support their strategies. Chris, do you want to add anything else on this lesson?
A couple of things. So leverage BPI practitioners will come up in different ways in some of the other lessons as well. So we really wanted to plant that early. And one of the great things for me about working on this book is that Candice and I meet pretty much every week and talk about things. And I hadn't really dealt with process inventories much in the past, and it's been a great learning experience for me to hear how Candice and her team are using it much more. It's a much more engaging tool when used effectively than I have imagined it would be. Okay, I guess if we go to the next one. So learn the language. Encourage leaders to understand what we do. And I think back to my own career where I started in finance and became a management accountant and then became a manager. And my management accounting background was very useful, understanding budgets and finance and costing. But I had to learn how to interact effectively with IT people, with now medical, technical people, legal and contract people, and each marketing people, and each one of them has their own kind of unique language to their business. And leaders need to learn enough of that language to be able to navigate around. Like if you're going somewhere for 3 days, you can get by with a couple of phrases. If you want to go and live in a place for 2 months, you need to learn the language to really get the value of it properly. And so we say leaders need to learn the language of BPI, and we try to do that in a very kind of an introductory way. I love fishbone diagrams. I think of that that's the quote from Archimedes, give me a long enough lever and I can move the world. I think give me a fishbone diagram and a process map. I can do anything with a team, not on my own, and a RACI chart as well. Okay, so Candice, if we go to the next one. So know the value. Couple of different things in here. We really want people to understand the value of business process improvement or continuous improvement to the people who are interacting with it, to the organization, and I think really importantly to the leaders themselves. And this is coming back to what Rufus said yesterday. And we talk a little bit about this in the introduction we've written as well, that it's simply not taught in a lot of business programs. And that's, there's lots of things that are not taught. Program content is finite, but there's a real gap in understanding, through no fault of the leaders, but through what they have learned and what they have experienced, what they've been exposed to over time. There's just an information gap there. And so part of the point of the book is to try to fill that gap, understand the value of improving work processes and work practices for the organization, and the value to the practitioners, or the value of the practitioners to everybody else in the organization, which we touch on a little bit further on as well. So really a sales pitch, but targeted in different ways, including what's in it for the leader to actually engage with this. Sorry, I should ask Candice whether you want to add comments.
No, you don't worry. I'm
Talk as you go.
I'll hop in.
So this one, build the culture, I think is really important. Certainly my own experience is that my university jumped into a program, trained a small number of people, let them loose, and worked with teams. And I ended up with this sort of mental image of the teams that had participated in rapid improvement events, wandering around in the desert going, we've changed. Where is everybody else? Why is it so dry and barren out here? Because we didn't do anything as an organization to prepare the ground beforehand. We just kind of launched into it. And if you're not exposed to it and your leadership hasn't worked with it before, it's highly likely to fail. So work on developing people and their mindset before improvements can be realized. And we talk a bit in the book about the challenges in framing the programs, what I would describe as the risk of consultants. Consultants bring in great expertise and knowledge, but they also are paid to deliver, I forget the term, there's work packages. And so they, in a way are incentivized to get in, do something, get out again, move on to the next one because they've got their own pressures. We talk a couple of places in the book about failure versus unrealistic scoping. And something that I've become really interested in over time is resistance to change actually being redescribed as communication attempts by employees. Resistance to change is a lovely phrase for people to say when things aren't going as they should be, which very nicely positions all of the fault and the blame with the people who the change is being done to rather than the change agents.
Yeah, and I think another thing here, Chris, I will hop in on this one. Something that I think practitioners often experience when going in is, I know I certainly do, is having to build a culture with a team before you can get an effective result. You can't just walk in and say, okay, we're going to do continuous improvement today. If that team is not in a functioning state where they're ready to do that, it doesn't work well. So that culture component is really critical.
Yeah, and you don't even need to go in and say, we're going to do continuous improvement. I mean, what I do in my own job is I actually keep a fishbone diagram template on my desk. If somebody comes in with an issue, I'll just start drawing on a bit of paper and saying, well, let's have a look at this. I don't need to say to them, I'm leaning you, or, we're being lean. They just need to know they're getting value from what we're doing. And then afterwards, I might say, oh, hey, by the way, this is a fishbone diagram. I can tell you all about it and so much more. But it's about demonstrating the value first, getting people in that way rather than through by doing it that way.
Yeah.
So avoid decision traps. This is one where I think the ideas are fairly well settled, but we're interested in feedback on all of them, and I guess I'm interested in feedback on this one particularly. So coming out of, when I look at why improvement programs and why change programs, why transformation projects fail, it's often described as not realizing the benefits that it was supposed to, or people are disappointed. And I think there's something in there about underestimating cost and overstating benefits. And there's actually a really good book called How Big Things Get Done, which talks about mega projects and the way mega projects get approved. And this is a study across lots of different types of projects over time, is that they get overpromised and underquoted. And a politician stands up and makes a grand statement, and then the truth is slowly and horrifyingly revealed over time when it's too late to back out. And then afterwards, all of these projects that are said to have blown out in time and cost actually look about the same when you look at them and say, well, what did it really cost? How difficult was it really? What was the end result? And so it's not so much that every project was done badly, or maybe it was, but much more likely that the projects were just not described properly up front. So the framing and the scoping and the positioning is really important, not jumping to solutions at executive levels. And then a couple of other things that have really come out through conversations with people is what I call the inefficiency of silos and the risk of task shifting. And I've seen this actually happen where a type of work called a function will be centralized. So people who are deployed, you might have a whole bunch of schools in your university and each one of them has a marketing or an IT person, and then they're all centralized into a central unit, and then that unit downsizes and says, we're so efficient, we've saved X number of dollars. But what they've actually done is come up with a set of work within scope that's much less than what used to be done. The other work falls off the table, or it just gets quietly absorbed by a whole bunch of other people, but doesn't get counted. The effort is sort of lost. And so task shifting is something to be aware of in looking at these things, because it can make things seem much more efficient than they really are. And this wasn't one that I thought of initially, but through feedback, where the team is located in the organization, how often it gets moved around, and how vulnerable the team feels over time actually sends some really important messages to everybody else in the organization, because they see it. They see how often they move. They talk to the team. Nothing is really a secret in an organization. And so how you treat your team matters, and that's one of the messages that we're really keen to get across in the book as well.
All right, the next lesson, clean the house. And so, Chris, I'll prep you, because if you don't mind sharing the anecdote you heard from Steve, I think that's a very good descriptor of this title about cleaning the house. But this lesson, if you can remember, okay.
Okay,
if not, I'll clue in. But this lesson is really focusing on waste, but not. We'll do a little bit just to introduce waste, but it's not going to talk about how to use them to clean a project. It's really going to focus on the waste of not utilizing skills and resources and the traps that come with that, because those are the most common ones. And so I heard someone in a session earlier call it the lift and shift. So with technology and with people, buying a new piece of technology and just moving that process over is one of those things that gets us in a bad space when we're doing processes or projects. Systems, not really redesigning a process and not helping it to fit into our system. So that being a really important trap there of not utilizing the skills we have in our employees and not utilizing the skills of our technology. Not utilizing the people we have to solve the problems. They know what's going on. Being prone to maybe not invite frontline people to the conversation because you want to have it at a higher level within the executive group before you go down to the masses. that can sometimes catch us up. There are times that's relevant, but when we're looking at problems, we've got to go underneath the surface and really find what's going on there and making sure we have the right people in the room. Really not training and enabling people to be problem solvers. So most of us work in organizations where there's just a handful of people that do continuous improvement. Not training, not enabling, not setting that cultural component up really doesn't set you up for success for problem solving. And realizing those benefits of connection and what that gets you, with freeing up people's time to do process improvement and be more connected with your customers or your clients, instead of being weighted down in administrative burden. So really this lesson is about framing waste not as something to go through and just look for as a tool, but framing it as something that is created by structural issues, and looking for it is valuable not just for individuals, but the organization.
Now, if I remember this correctly, I was talking to Steve, who was telling me that his mother wanted more storage. I said to him, we need to buy more cupboards. I have run out of storage space. In his incredibly gentle way, he was saying, well, let's have a look at what you've got. and over time, was like, well, do you really need all these things? I don't know whether some of these things have moved for several decades. Why don't you have a look at what you've got, and then we'll work out what to do. And through a series of check-ins over time, she started going through everything and finding things that she hadn't seen for years, and she just started organizing them and keeping what she wanted and coming up with ideas about what to do with things. And so in the end, she didn't need any more storage. She rearranged what she had, and she had a whole bunch of things that had sparked her imagination to to do some projects, to do things, and she was very energized and excited by it all. So I hope that's the one you're referring to, Candice. And so how we got the title "Clean the House" is we've been wrestling with these titles over time, and I remember telling Candice this story and saying, yeah, I think there's something in that, and then we just settled on "Clean the House" as a way to try to talk about optimizing things in a way that, explain it all in a way that's accessible and sort of low on jargon. Speaking of low on jargon, Rust Never Sleeps. This is one of my favorite Neil Young albums, and I was just so excited when I settled on this title. We were talking about sustain the change, stop backsliding, various things. How do you, as you get things going, how do you keep them going, and how do you stop things eating away at the progress? And I just remembered this album title actually, and thinking about it, that there's always something going to be going on. There's always going to be some risk that you're not aware of. There's always going to be something slowly eating away at the progress. And so you cannot be complacent. You have to try to make things as robust as you can. And so I hope that this title adequately captures the various things that we describe through the book. And we talk about some of the risk factors that come up. And coming back to the idea of process improvement teams or lean teams feeling vulnerable, I think a lot of these things, when they start in organization, are like single leader dependent. And when there's a change of leadership, the support and the momentum can vanish really quickly. Changes of leadership can trigger all sorts of things. It can trigger, organizational restructures as well, because people come in and they want to shape things differently. So we just lost my thought there. Sorry. We wanted to capture that and talk about different things.
I think I think that pretty much catches it up, but really this is kind of tying the button on everything of how do you keep it going. And I heard someone earlier say, like, you don't just come in and do one process improvement cycle and stop. it's something that you have to continue to keep doing.
Yeah, there is. I mean, again, when you look at the research on why improvement programs or change programs fail, the top two headlines are lack of leader support and lack of employee engagement. And there's an awful lot of stuff going on in there. And so what we try to do in this chapter is dig into that a little bit, also pick up on elements of the previous chapters and pull it all together, hopefully in a way that makes people understand that this is something that you need to continue to invest in over time, and also really make the point that it's about investing in the people who are in the improvement team, the people who are the stakeholders, the people who will be the participants, because it does have to be something that seeps out into the organization. It's not it's not like getting a vaccine, it's not like one shot in the arm and you're done. It's more like a diet. It's something that you have to live with every day and work on.
All right. So I'll drop a fresh link in the chat, but we'll transition over here. I'll stop sharing screen for a moment while I do that. But if you'd move over to the Lucid board, we would love to hear from you guys, and we're open for questions, comments, and discussion as well.
So I know we've thrown a lot at you in a relatively short time. Happy to have follow-up conversations as well, but we are very keen to get people's reactions. And as I said, we are not precious about these. We really are trying to channel what everybody has been telling us over several years and put that together in something that you can pick up and get value from.
So to start out here, I see several people on the board already. The first block is just a refresh of the lessons, so 1 through 7. That way you can reference them. The second block is overall feedback. So if you don't mind going in there, and if you have some thoughts, please jot them into those Post-it notes. What are your thoughts overall on these lessons? Our second question there, do these lessons resonate with your experience? And then the third, is there anything we missed? While everyone's getting in here, I will give you guys just 2 minutes. Misty, go ahead.
So one of the things that Chris, you mentioned, and I can't remember exactly which chapter it was, but you said that sometimes institutions or universities don't know where to put BPI. So my question is if you have somebody who's coming from the outside of an institution who doesn't come from a lean background, in this chapter, if you have somebody new coming, are there going to be like questions or like a checklist to help this person or this team make sure that they're in the best place possible?
Hadn't thought about that. That's possibly a good idea. Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion, Misty. I hadn't thought about a checklist for deciding. I think it needs to be close to the executive, like needs to be close to the decision makers. Other people may have different views, but they also need to be able to operate, a little bit independently because they need to build trust. And where So going back to the value of leveraging the BPI practitioner, they are great sources of information about what's really going on in organizations. You know, like if you've got a team that's well connected and understands what's happening, this is an opportunity for a leader to get unfiltered advice, unbiased advice, because most people who are talking to somebody above them will be talking from the point of view of, their own position, and of course with some idea of protecting or expanding their own empire. So I think having them accessible to both the broader community, the broader organization, and to the leadership is important. I mean, I know at Texas, the team's sort of been embedded in the IT area, and that I think is pretty common in higher education. I'm interested in what other people think about that. I'm personally not convinced that that's the sort of the optimal spot, but yeah, very keen to hear what other people think as well.
Thanks, Chris.
What are your thoughts on that, Candice? I hadn't thought about a checklist, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a beneficial thing to consider. Vikram, go ahead.
Thanks, Candice.
You're on me.
And Chris, yeah, I realized it half a second in. Thanks. I was just reflecting on what you were saying, Chris, around positioning, because it came up in conversation a couple of times, but specifically last evening when we had the presentation from Jose and Karim. I agree. I think there's some tensions that are, even if they're not real, they can be perceived, and conflicts of interest. So it's really worth thinking about. I had put my hand up to ask about something else though, because Bill made a really cool, shared a really cool thought when Tony was presenting about using AI, about the balance of what we're choosing to automate and whether we're assigning appropriate value to that or not. And in the chapter that the two of you have around knowing the value, this may already be part of your plan, but I'm keen to hear a bit more, if so, whether there's some room to discuss the value of product over process, and consequently the sort of long-term values that we assign to actually improving process as a way to achieve better product rather than simply focusing on the product.
Yeah, no, we haven't. I wouldn't say we've described it that way. We've more looked at the act of improving a process is a learning exercise, and so there's an improvement in the people as well as an improvement in the process. And early on, probably the improvement in the people and the learning that the people have is actually of greater value than the process improvement. And then over time, you get much greater process improvements because you've got this collective sort of upskilling. So I'm not sure, is that what you mean? I'm not sure what you mean by product.
That's pretty much what I was talking about, Chris. Like the improvement itself, sometimes being less of less value in the long term for organizations and people and their collective resilience, adaptability, etc., than the learning that you were talking about. It seems to get lost in conversation a lot, especially with executive priorities being on, sort of, having a level of immediacy to them, which is understandable, but that's what I'm curious about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the feedback we've gotten is that it's really in the framing. So if it's positioned as, we'll get the low-hanging fruit and we'll get the quick wins and the consultants will come in and they'll save you X million dollars, then it gets framed as something quite, cash-based and transactional. If it's described as this is a cultural intervention, and so Bikram was actually the person who said you need simpler chapter titles, go for 3-word slogans, because I think I had a draft chapter title that was called "It's a Cultural Intervention First," and I mean, I'm paraphrasing Vikram's feedback was, that's a mouthful. And so we were really trying to get to simplicity. But so we ended up, I think those things end up in the build the culture chapter, and parts of it are actually in avoid decision traps. That you need to know what it is that you're really trying to do. And I thought some of Rufus's comments yesterday were really, really interesting for someone to be at such a senior level and have such a different background to maybe other vice chancellors, that what we're talking about is actually a cultural intervention well before it's a business improvement intervention or business improvement activity. And the way to sustain it and embed it and get better results over time is really to focus on the people. Now, I remember a conversation I had with Bill Bolzer actually one time, and he said, I mean, it was a great thing about the Lean Higher Education Network is you get to talk to all these really intelligent and really insightful people. And Bill said something like, as an industrial organizational psychologist, I would never roll out an intervention without properly understanding what was going on and without being sure people were ready for it. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that. And I just thought, yeah, that's exactly right. You know, when you do a change program or you do a business improvement program of some sort, it is a cultural intervention in the organization, even if the people doing it don't quite understand that at the time.
Thank you for all the feedback and conversation. If you haven't, or if you wish to, the next section below is lesson feedback. If you have any thoughts on a particular lesson, please leave any thoughts. I did put the summaries in there so that you can skim over those because we went over them all so quickly. And it's the first time seeing them, so I put those on there if you want to breeze through those. And if there was a particular lesson that if it didn't quite ring true, or if you thought there was some information missing, please add your thoughts there. While y'all are doing that, I did see some comments up top about, are we going to put tools and or use cases in here? Yes, there will be some tools, there will be use cases to help demonstrate the connection between these activities and the tools we're going to introduce. We'll talk about, I know the first one is we'll talk about process inventory and probing questions to give that introduction as a leadership skill.
Yeah, and a little bit in the learn the language chapter as well. I guess it's maybe a tension in a book like this is how much is about messaging and information and how much is sort of down in the details of here's how you do something. But we are going to introduce some. We're trying to keep it to a minimum number of tools, really just ones to reinforce the messages. I mean, my own view of any tool is that it's a prop for communication and for conversation. And so, as I said before, in working with a fishbone diagram with someone, it's all about getting to the better understanding of what's happening. And the tool is important, but in a way it's also incidental. And so we're trying to introduce them in that way, demonstrating the value of it up front. More in the chat. So Bill said, if you don't have a supportive lean culture, people may be less than willing to self-report processes that aren't working well. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Chris, I think we're at the end here.
Okay.
Chatter and the board has slowed down. Thank you all very much for your feedback. I appreciate it. And if anyone would like to speak with us and dig in on any of these or give us any additional feedback, we are absolutely open to that. Just drop a line in the chat and your email, and we'll reach out to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Candice and Chris, for that lovely opportunity to give you some early feedback on what your thinking is around the book. I think there's definite agreement looking at the Lucid chart that this is a definite gap in knowledge, and there's a real, well, I'd say a ready market for this book, even if it's just all of us buying it to give it to people in our institutions. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide feedback, to ask you questions, to help you test that thinking. And yeah, if anyone is interested in having a longer conversation with Chris or Candice, please do either pop your details down there or just get in touch with the Lean email address that you've had the meeting invitation from, and we can pass those details on. I would like to thank you both, and round of applause again. It's a bit hard to hear us all, but thank you so much. I think, as Bill has also put into the chat, looking forward to getting hold of this book when it comes out. And maybe just, riffing a bit on Tony's earlier presentation, could we, then build it into some sort of AI tool that we could prompt, that our leaders could use, and prompt a question and go, how should I tackle this? How do we do this? How do we bring these things together? Just thinking about how
We
we do that.
probably should. I have to say, I am studiously avoiding AI. I shouldn't, but I am. I'm going to blame my age. Yeah, I've used it a little bit, but not a lot, and used it with a fair bit of mistrust, I have to say. I'm yet to be converted, but I mean, I was very impressed with what Antonio did this morning. And actually, I know an executive coach who has built an avatar of himself and says it's a very nice business model once he's got a clientele and he's got reputation, to have a 24/7 version of him where he controls all of the language in the background and people can check in with the virtual person at any time. So, I mean, there clearly is value, and it probably is a good idea to do that.
Maybe the next session that you guys do for us could be bringing you together, and we go, how can we do this? How do we broaden the reach for people who want to play in that more digital space? Excellent. Thank you both so much.